This is BBC One, and now from Brighton we move north to Manchester to open the airwaves to viewers, putting forward their comments to the programme makers in Open Air.
Welcome back to Open Air. No, your clock isn't wrong. All this week we'll be here at the later time of 12:30. And as always, we'll be looking at what interests you in the world of broadcasting. Today we're taking a look at our colleagues in BBC Radio. Radio 1 celebrates its 20th birthday. How has it changed since the swinging 60s? Can it look forward to the next 20 years? Well, that's the main topic for today, and we want to hear your views, as usual, on the number 061 814 0424. And to join in the Radio 1 festivities, we have in our London studio Johnny Beerling, controller of Radio 1. He's been involved with the station since the very first programme. And here with us in Manchester is Dave Cash, who, if you saw our early edition, was with us then, telling us about his choice of viewing. Your calls to them, please, 061 814 0424, whether you want to reminisce about the past or find out about the way forward for popular music. But first, let's go over to Natalie to find out what you've been calling about so far this morning. Natalie.
Well, Patty, Dave has already been on the line from Bracknell to say that whilst everyone is saying congratulations to Radio 1, that perhaps we should also remember that Radio 2 and the others are also celebrating their birthdays today. And you may remember that in the early edition of the programme at 8:40, that we had several romantics who rang in because they wanted to know when Paul Dark is returning to the screen. They included Susan Smith from Tamworth, Mrs. Edwards from Bristol, Susan Follett from Wigan, and Mrs. Chris from Liskeard, as well as Maureen Wardle from Loughborough. Well, we promised that we'd try and get an answer for you. The good news is that we've been on to BBC programme planning, and they've come up with the good news that Paul Dark will be returning to the screens, or repeats will be commencing on BBC 2 Monday the 26th at 4:30. And now we're about to put Patty in the hot seat for a change. We had a phone call earlier today from Mrs. Molly Sparrow, who's been on the line from Cambridge. And she said that On the House, the other programme that Patty presents, had a competition question which relied on you seeing the colours of the wires in a plug. Now, Mrs. Sparrow has a black and white set, and she's not alone. Rose Stacks of Southampton and Howard Griffin of Stourbridge have also been on the telephone, also complaining about the fact that they couldn't see the colours. In fact, there are 2,379,109 black and white sets compared to 16,794,344 colour sets. Well, Patty, what can you do to help Molly and Howard and Rose with that problem?
Well, it would be a technical one about plugs, wouldn't it? I know nothing about that, but it's not really fair, this. The producer should be here, but I'll tell you what he said to me this morning. He apologises to the people who were watching in black and white. The first question, though, for the £3,000 prize was basically to find out how you wire a plug up properly. And, of course, even I know that if you've got to have the earth wire in the right place. In fact, if you know about it, you will know the earth wire is lighter colour and striped, so even in black and white you should be able to tell where it goes. But for those people who aren't happy with that, who think it might be more difficult, we are going to try and rerun that so you still have a chance to win the £3,000 prize.
Yes. I think I understand that, Patty, thanks. Janet Fraser has also been on the line, by the way, to say that she sent her video hoping to see your programme and missed it because it had been moved for the Ryder Cup. Any chance of a repeat? Well, we managed to contact Roger Lawton, who's head of daytime television, but he says, no, Janet, I'm afraid not before Christmas, but there are plans afoot to re-edit and show the series again in the new year, so good news for you there. And talking about the Ryder Cup and the early edition of Open Air, as I mentioned, at 8:40 this morning, we had one caller on the line. That was Clive Deverell from Aylesbury, who was a bit cross that he considered the lack of coverage. And since then, we've had several callers on the line who've said the recorded golf shouldn't be shown when there was live action going on, the winning putts weren't showing live, there was too much talking and not enough golf. But we did have two calls, Victor Isaacs of Southampton and Mrs. Tyler of Kent, who said congratulations to the sports team. Well done, BBC Sport. Pattie.
Thank you, Natalie. Now, of course, Radio 1 celebrates its 20th birthday today. And do you recognise these faces?
Woke up one morning half asleep with all my blankets in a heap and yellow roses scattered all around. The time was still approaching, for I couldn't stand it anymore. So Mary goes upon my eider down. I'm just sitting watching flowers in the rain, feel the power of the rain, making the garden grow. I'm just sitting watching flowers in the rain, feel the power of the rain, keeping me cool. So I lay upon my side with all the windows open wide.
And the DJ and the DJ, 20 years on, you've aged very well.
Thank you,
Dave
ma'am.
Cash.
Thank
Dave,
you.
Looking back at that, it was all the sort of the floral shirts, and it was the wild women.
Colours.
Yes, and the song and the wild parties, and you were pretty known for all this, weren't you? You had a bit of a good time then, didn't you?
Yeah, we called it having a good time. I think the press made more of it than it really was. I mean, we used to, Ed Stewart, I remember, and Pete Brady and Ev, and everyone, we used to end up doing like most guys of 25 and 26 who were single did. You know, went down to the pub for a few, I think.
What, before or after you'd done your breakfast show?
No, always after.
Do you miss those days?
No, I think you live through them, and DJs, I believe, should, that they have their time, they have their few years, and then they should move on and do other things.
Which is what you've done, of course.
Yeah.
Yes, right. Okay, well, stay with us, Dave, because people wanting to call in and speak to you, and later on also you'll have the chance to speak to the man in charge of the national pop music station, Johnny Beerling. But first, we took our cameras out to hear from some of the people who work for and listen to Radio 1, and to find out just what they think.
Radio 1, the big one. Steve Wright.
Radio 1 should be a friend. I mean, it's a corny kind of Barry Manilow thing to say. But hopefully Radio 1 is a friend. I mean, we have 7 million people listening in the afternoons. What I try and do on the air is not make it all comedy or all news or all music. Try and do a bit of everything, really. So, you know, we do a lot of topicality. Hopefully, if it's going on in Great Britain, we're talking about it on the air.
Radio 1, Stevie Wright. He's my man.
Because he's very silly.
Like Mr. Angry and all that sort of business. It's good fun to listen to when you're working.
The other thing we do is characters, and hopefully they're characters that people can relate to. Everybody knows a slightly camp hairdresser or an inept showbiz manager. If you don't know one, you might have seen that kind of character on television. So it's all about, without sounding too pretentious, relating to people. And I think really that's the role of popular radio and popular television.
Not the cheapest, just the best.
I quite like stuff like Steve Wright and the stuff on the Sunday afternoon where they show you sort of the best of the week. That kind of programme, and also the stuff on Sunday morning, the Mike Reid show and stuff like that.
Mike Reid.
Well, I was about to bore you with the wretched details of me at Radio 1. I was dragged screaming away from Radio Luxembourg. Did, I think, my first radio programme at the beginning of '79 for Radio 1, doing an evening programme from Manchester. I then graduated onto evening programmes down in London, playing the slightly more alternative stuff, but not as alternative as Peel, of course, but, you know, slightly right field of Peel. And then I did a few stand-ins for the illustrious Tony Blackburn, since the Plot, of course. And, my golly, I forgot. Oh, and I eventually went on to the Breakfast Show, of course. Being the fourth person to do it in the wake of Tony Blackburn was the first ever Breakfast Show presenter, and then Noel Edmonds, then David Travis, and then moi. I did it for 5.5 years until Mike Smith took over, and now I'm exploding back.
I like the DJs. They're fun. You know, they talk to you like you're a person, like you're on the phone, not like you're on radio.
Mike Reid in the morning sometimes.
Mike Smith, anything really.
I listen to the morning, usually middle, and going home at night time.
Simon Mayo.
Radio 1, I think, has changed and adapted to musical trends better than most radio stations. I mean, obviously there's an element of he would say that, wouldn't he, because he works for them. But because they are more committed, I think, than any other station I've ever heard across the country to bringing forward new bands, to bringing forward exciting new records that actually probably won't be immediate commercial successes to start with. And so perhaps less adventurous radio stations will say, I think we might lose a few listeners if we play that. Radio 1, because it's all part of the BBC system, has been able to say, well, okay, yes, but I think in the long run this will pay off. And so I think musically it has kept pace with what's happened outside it, in the music world better than any other radio station.
And the man in the hot seat of Radio 1 is Johnny Beerling. He is in our London studio now. Good morning, Johnny.
Good morning, Patty.
Now then, we have a lot of calls coming through. Quite a few critical ones, I have to warn you.
Well, I'm sure you can never please all the people all the time.
No, so shall we go straight to the phones? Because we'll try and get as many as we can in as possible. Bruce Davis from Dorset. Hello, Bruce.
Good morning.
What do you want to say to Johnny?
First of all, happy birthday, Johnny.
Thank you very much, Bruce.
I enjoy listening to Radio 1, and I'd like to ask you, what is your favourite moment over the last 20 years on Radio 1?
Favourite moment?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the highlights was working with Dave Cash, who, funny enough, is on the programme this morning, because Dave Cash used to work with Kenny Everett, and we did a programme called Kenny and Cash, and probably the best one we ever did was on Christmas Day in about 1968, 1969, just after we started, and that was really hilarious, because those boys certainly know how to let their hair down, and that was one of the outstanding moments. I think the other one, very briefly, was when we started the Radio 1 Road Show in 1973 down in Newquay, and we turned up and our engineers hadn't bought a long enough mains lead, which did give me a sort of heart attack, bearing in mind it was a major outside broadcast.
Let me ask Dave, what's your memory of those early days?
Just about the same thing. Yeah, I remember that Kenny and Cash show because we used to wind Beerling up like there was no tomorrow. We couldn't pronounce your name, I think was the gig that we used to get into. We used to call him Johnny Smearling and Bonnie Dearling.
Most people still can't.
Yeah.
But I gather that you were telling us earlier this morning that on your very first programme, the dinner lady came in and read out the entire menu for lunch.
That's right. Kathy Jones, who ended up as a character called Alice from the Restaurant, because Alice's Restaurant was a hit then. And as she did it, it started to snowball, and she used to create these wonderful menus that nobody had ever heard of at the BBC, Dove under glass sandwiches, things like this. And she used to come in the afternoon sort of every once in a while and do these menus. And that all started by a mistake as well.
Well, that's enough reminiscing. Let's take another call, please. Martin Sterling is on the line from Martin Sterland, I'm sorry, from Winterton-on-Sea. Is that right, Martin?
Yeah, that's right.
Are you a fan or a foe of Radio 1?
Not so much of a fan, no, more of a foe.
How old are you first?
32.
Right, so you were how old? You were about 15 or 16, weren't
yeah,
you?
I used to listen a hell of a lot, yeah.
Yes. So what's your question to Johnny Briley, or your comment?
Well, I'd like to say to Johnny, when are we going to see a 24-hour service from Radio 1, and when are we going to see a 24-hour stereo service from Radio 1?
I'm glad you asked that, Martin. That gives me the chance to promote a few things or get a few things off my chest. We're waiting anxiously, and it's not the BBC's problem. The DTI, Department of Trade and Industry, control access to the frequencies, and at the moment a lot of the frequencies which are allocated for the 4th VHF network are currently occupied by people like the police and the ambulance and the fire brigade. Now, by 1990, they will have to move from those frequencies, but of course local authority money being in short supply, it does take some time for them all to be re-equipped for their radios. Now, as and when they move off from those frequencies, then we can open up the Radio 1 transmitters. I'm very hopeful that within the London area we might have something on the air by Christmas, and then perhaps I think the next area will possibly be Scotland, and then over the next 18 months we'll gradually spread the service. And really, until you get a VHF FM stereo service, there's little point in broadcasting through the night, because I think everyone would agree AM broadcasting on the medium wave is such an old-fashioned, poor quality method of broadcasting, and frankly our coverage after dark isn't very good. It's about 60% of the country. So until we get the VHF FM service, there isn't much point in applying to broadcast for longer hours.
Martin, presumably you'll be pleased to hear that that's coming.
That's great. I'm a night waker now. Some of the stuff we have to listen to at the moment is diabolical. You know?
Is it just the quality you're complaining about, Martin?
No, what also I'm complaining about is the fact that Radio 1 in particular seems to be a chart show, you know, with 2-hour slots, just change the DJ and let's start again, you know. Don't they think they're a little bit out of touch with what's happening, say, like on the pirate radios, land-based, in London area, for instance?
Johnny, we've had quite a lot of calls making this point, that you should play a more diverse kind of music, that it's safe and middle of the road. What do you say to that?
There are 2 points about that, Martin. I think certainly the allegations you're making are not true about the evening programmes from 5:30 onwards, when people like Bruno Brooks, Janice Long, John Peel, Andy Kershaw, these sort of presenters are actually doing fairly specialist or alternative music programmes, so we're not following a strict programme format, and the music certainly has a wide range. If you listen to any of those, I think you'd probably have to agree with what Simon Mayo was saying, that we do take a lot of chances, because you mustn't lose sight of the fact that Radio 1 gives over 5,000 hours per year to recording up-and-coming new bands. Just later this week, I'm going to Frankfurt, where we're taking part in a European rock festival, and we're taking a brand new band who don't even yet have a recording contract, a band called Glory. And we are constantly exposing these new bands, and then record companies come along and pick them up and sign them up. So we do what we can.
We have had quite a lot of complaints about this. Let me read 1 or 2 of them for you. Robert Burley from Chichester says he thinks Radio 1 is conservative and unadventurous, except for John Peel. Elaine Smith from Derbyshire says Radio 1 is very boring, you hear the same records all the time. And Mr. Francis from Tunbridge Wells, why do you play the same music on Radio 1 all the time? This leads me to the question I most want to ask, is how can somebody of your age, who has gone through it for 20 years, Johnny, possibly have a clue what the kids want?
Quite right. I don't pick the music is the quick answer to that one, Patty. I mean, I would admit that I'm getting a little long in the tooth as a music picker. I did my stint of that when I was in the days working with Dave Cash back in the 1960s.
Yes.
I mean, frankly, I have a head of music who's 33 years old and a team of producers whose average age is between sort of 25 and 30, and I think they're very much in touch, and it's they who pick the music. And they may say we play the same records over and over again. It's not true, actually, but on the other hand, a popular music service, which is paid for by everybody through the license fee, has a duty to try and cater for a large section of the audience and play that which is broadly popular during the daytime.
Right, let's take another call from Dick Harty in Wimbledon. Dick.
Hello there.
What's your comment?
I noticed when Mr. Cash was on your preview this morning, he chose a country western song, actually. My complaint about Radio 1 is that it's almost 90% devoted to so-called pop music, actually, which hasn't changed the jangling guitars, which they can't play, and the percussion, and the shrieking voices. I'd like to know why Radio 1 has not educated the children in this country to know there is such thing as country western, and all forms of jazz, and reggae, and folk music, and South American.
So you don't object simply to pop music, you just want a wide range, do you?
No, I don't object to pop music, because what has happened is the kids have been brought up in this medium only. They know nothing about other forms of music. That's why I said to your switchboard earlier, the kids today, they never sing because they don't know any songs.
Okay, Johnny, answer that one.
I'm going to bounce this back to Dave in a minute, because he knows I was raised on Charlie Pride and Hank Williams. But obviously, our caller there hasn't listened to many of Radio 1's evening programmes, because if you listen to Andy Kershaw, about 50% of Andy Kershaw's programme between 10 and 12 on a Thursday night is actually devoted to country music. And also, as far as reggae music is concerned, we have a specialist show on Sunday evenings between 11 and 12, presented by Miss P. And there is a fair reflection of country-influenced songs in some of the other programmes that we play during the week on Radio 1.
Let me bring in Dave Cash then. Now, you were saying to us this morning that there's very little country music on television. Is there enough on radio, and indeed on Radio 1?
Well, not for me. I mean, I could have a whole channel of country music and be quite happy with it, as Johnny knows, because I used to bother him with the latest stuff all the time. No, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, John, there's a lot of stuff on Radio 2, isn't there?
Well, yes, I was going on to say, I mean, of course, you mustn't just take Radio 1 in isolation. The two networks do complement each other, and there's an awful lot more country music. I can't remember which evening it is, but certainly on one evening a week, there's about 3 hours of it on Radio 2 as well.
Let me go back to Dick and see if he's happy with that answer. Dick, do you not accept that it is spread around and that there's some on Radio 2?
They realise that in fact they have the taste of a whole generation of people, because these kids know nothing except about pop music. Now, what they could do, of course, is they could slip a educate the kids, to show there are other forms of music played, by the way, by musicians, not by chance.
Dick, I have to butt in here and say I think you're speaking not as a regular listener. You have a perception about Radio 1 which simply isn't true.
That shut him up. Thank you very much. So we'll take that. Thank you for calling, Dick. Dick Harty from Wimbledon. Let's now take a call from Sally Henstock. Sally.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Sally.
Good afternoon.
Do you think the role of radio DJ has changed? And is it still enough just to have a good radio voice, or have you got to be a multimedia superstar?
Oh, that's a good one for you, Dave.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever been the case. I think we all did other things. When I was with Radio 1, and even now I do other things. You can't just have one prong to the fork, no. The only thing is that now the DJs get a lot more than we did, but then again, the cost of living, that famous Bentley you were talking about, cost me £2,000, 15 years ago. Now they're 50 or 60,000.
Yeah.
So when you read about DJs making a lot of money and being multimedia millionaires, I mean, it was about the same for us, only, cost of living was different.
Can I ask you, Sally? Sally?
Yes?
Do you approve of the cult of personality of DJs?
Well, I don't really know, actually.
Do you like the patter? Do you like the fact that they're fun, lively, fairly silly and jolly?
Well, yes, I think they've got to have a good personality to stand out amongst all the other people in the business.
Yes. Johnny, what's your policy on DJs? Because they don't half prattle on at some points, don't they?
They do a bit, and occasionally I've been known to sound off about the amount they prattle on. In fact, there's a slogan up in our studio which says, "One thought, one link."
Yes.
And one witty DJ has written underneath it, "He'll be lucky." But to be serious, yes, DJs do have to have a range of talent. Simon Mayo, who you saw in the little film earlier, has just worked for us on a project which was all about the Outward Bound and the way in which that organisation works, and he spent a week with them on their Inner City project, reporting back to Radio 1, and there he was acting in the role of reporter. We expect them to be original, but above all, we expect them to have a knowledge and an awareness and enthusiasm for the music they're presenting.
Tony Blackburn, somebody who's very critical of Radio 1, is all over the papers saying what a bunch of wallies all your current people are. Are we likely to see any changes in this bunch of wallies?
Oh, well, I wouldn't agree they're a bunch of wallies. I think it's a bit sad that Tony made his name out of Radio 1 and goes around attacking us, but never mind, that's
good
up
old
to him.
Tony.
Everyone's entitled to their opinion, folks. Yes, we have got a number of changes coming up. I mean, the biggest change is in the way we present our chart show this weekend, because it will be the fastest ever chart, in that the figures from something like 500 record shops will be computed over Saturday night, delivered to us at about 3:30 on Sunday afternoon, and our new chart show this weekend will be the most up-to-date one. We also have several new DJs appearing. We've got Jeff Young coming in doing a new dance music program. We've got a couple of new lady presenters, which will please your listeners and viewers.
I'm glad to hear it. We didn't get to that point, but two out of how many?
Well, Andy Kershaw's sister has now got a job. Andy's had to make way for his sister. Liz Kershaw's coming in.
Good.
And Ro Newton. They're doing a magazine program.
This is not a program for advertising, Johnny. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you on your little promotion there, but good luck with the future.
What was coming up that was new?
Yes, thank you very much, and good luck with the new ideas, and happy birthday, and our thanks indeed to Dave Cash in his birthday suit.
Thank you.
Natalie. Good to hear we're having some more female presenters on radio as well. Mrs. Batchelor has been on the line from 5 to say, smashing to hear Mike Reid back on the radio in the afternoon. Leslie Horton from Dumfries complains that Radio 1 DJs chat far too much and there's too little music. James von Brenniger from Scunthorpe and Mandy Walsh of Cambridgeshire say the music's great, but all the DJs talk to the audience as if they were only 12 years old, and some adults do listen to the programme as well. And Mrs. Jackson and Mrs. Jepson, both from Manchester, said although we had several calls complaining about the quality of Radio 1 presentation, they both listened for 20 years, and they feel although the music has changed over the years, they're still going to remain fans.